All right, we are here. Welcome, welcome. Who's here? Introduce yourself in the chat, please. I'm so excited for what we're going to talk about today, and I apologize if there's any road noise going on. We are parked next to a busy road, but it has great cell service. So introduce yourself in the chat if you are here. And today we're going to talk about how to give your to-do list this major makeover and just revolutionize how you're thinking about planning your weeks and your days. If you have any questions about anything, there is a Q&A button below. This is the first time using Zoom, so how I think it's going to work is you can click that button, drop your question in there, and then I can access it. At the end, we're going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A after I go through the material. You also have two different download options that I sent to you in an email. So if you did not receive those yet or you missed them, Joseph's going to put in the chat the links to those right now. So one are class notes that are just going to sort of an outline of the material, has blanks that you can fill in. I love doing that when I'm listening to classes online. The other one is a printable planning page set. I think there's about 10 planning pages in there. I'm going to be using those as some examples of weekly and daily task planning. Those come from the BrainBook Printable Library, which is my online planning membership site. So if you're interested in learning more about membership options there is a little discount code tucked into that download for you as well. So I am ready. I hope you are ready to dig into all things planning and to-do lists. I'm really excited about what we have to talk to you about today. So I'm going to pull up my slides and get started. If this is one of your first interactions with me, my name is Kaylin, and I've been married to Joseph for about 15 years. 3 years ago, we made the leap into full-time RV travel. So now we spend our days exploring the beautiful United States while also working from the road. And like I mentioned before, I'm also the founder of the BrainBook Library and KaylinBrook.com. And that's where I help women prioritize their mental health through planning and productivity systems, life-giving routines, and positive personal growth. Part of this mission is making sure that you have the right tools and mindset to manage your to-do list in the best way possible. I'm going to assume that everyone here loves a good to-do list, right? These are one of my favorite things to create. We sometimes, well, not sometimes, most of the time, get this thrill from checking things off and seeing everything that we can accomplish. But to-do lists can sometimes feel like a burden. So maybe you've experienced a week where the list keeps growing and growing and growing and you can't keep up. Suddenly you're buried under all these expectations and you don't know how to dig yourself out or which task to start with first. In this class, I'm going to help you approach to-do lists in a whole new way. Because to-do lists do not exist for us to pride ourselves on all the things we've accomplished. That's a great perk, don't get me wrong. But there's also a greater purpose behind our to-dos. They help us accomplish what is necessary before it becomes urgent and make intentional progress towards the right things. Because when we do that, we have more energy, more opportunities, and more time to invest in other things, people, and passions. And that's what we're going to explore today. So here's a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. The first thing is why we can't rely on our brains to capture and store all the information and tasks that we need to do, and how to help our unreliable brains with a task management system that we can set up and work seamlessly. Then we're going to go over the 5 different type of task buckets. So these buckets are where your tasks come from, and then how to manage each one as it relates to your weekly and daily to-do lists. Then we'll go over a sample step-by-step weekly planning routine that you can practice consistently at the beginning of every week. We'll cover how daily interruptions can actually work in your favor. And I know that sounds really strange, but it's true. And then we'll end with 3 potential temptations that you might face as you try to accomplish your to-do list. And then we'll go over 2 solutions to avoid each of them. There is a surprising amount of information that we could cover about task management here, and so many different directions that we can explore. But for today, I'm going to give you a basic structure of how to plan, prioritize, and execute the tasks on your to-do list based on the principles that I practice in my own life. Because I truly want your to-do list to excite you rather than stress you out. And I believe this is possible when every task serves a greater purpose towards the priorities you've set in your own life. And the best part is this method is completely customizable to your workflow. So be listening for how you might incorporate these ideas into your planning process. So first, let's talk about information overload. We absorb, process, and sort and filter more information than ever before. Just look at the study from 2021. In any given minute, our world streams 452,000 hours on Netflix, watches over 167 million TikToks, and sends over 12 million messages through iMessage. That's all in 1 minute. Some people call this the infodemic, so the constant stream of information that we send and receive. In 2011, another study published and compared this amount of this information to be the equivalent of every person reading 174 newspapers a day. I'd really love to see an updated version of this study because I can only imagine what this number is now. Add to that all the things that you're responsible for on a daily basis that come with managing a home, raising a family, and trying to fit in time for yourself. The author of Getting Things Done, David Allen, says, your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. Our brains are not meant to handle all of these unresolved things, and especially not all at once. Brains are great for filtering and processing and being creative, but not for storing information on a long-term basis. And I'm sure you've figured this out already, but our memories are not that reliable. So we have to, as Daniel Levitin says in his book, The Organized Mind, shift this burden of organizing and storing information to the external world. Writing down our tasks, whether it's in an app, a notebook, a planner, or just a sticky note, is going to allow your brain to let that information go because you've captured it somewhere else. You're not relying solely on your brain to do the work of recalling the information for you. And that frees up your brain to do what it does best, that thinking and that processing and that being creative. Do you remember this meme about your brain having too many tabs open? As I was working on this class, I had 16 browser tabs, a few articles I wanted to read, a RV reservation I was considering, the back-end dashboard of my membership site, my email, and more. Your brain is just like that, maybe even worse. But when you transfer that information over to an external system, you essentially close each tab and reduce the corresponding stress that accompanied that tab. So when I do this on my computer, the relief is instant. I no longer feel pulled in 16 different directions. And you're going to experience the same relief when you adopt the mindset that your brain is not your task management system and can't ever be. So now this might seem like a little basic, but I think it's really essential to define what a task actually is. Tasks are small, detailed, actionable steps. So something like plan a summer vacation isn't a task, it's a project. Tasks are going to be the single unit of action, whereas projects are made up of a series of tasks. Planning a summer vacation includes asking for time off work, researching lodging, creating a list of activities and restaurants to visit, and buying airline tickets, etc. These are small, detailed steps that make up the bigger project of planning a summer vacation. So what about that action part of the definition? So let's rewind to English class just for a minute, not for super long, and talk about parts of speech. So don't worry, we're not going to get too detailed with this, but I do want to mention that every task needs an action verb. Here's an example. Laundry is just a noun. It just exists. It's either ready to go into the wash or ready to be folded. We're not doing anything to laundry unless we add an action verb to the beginning. So instead of writing laundry in your planner, you could write down wash sheets and towels, fold laundry, put laundry away. Adding a verb is the tiniest tweak, and maybe it feels a little like overkill to be so specific. And you probably don't need to be this specific with some of your tasks. But if you do feel overwhelmed by your to-do list, it might be because that list is full of nouns and not action verbs. So try this hack and see if it makes a big difference in the attainability of what you need to do. So now that we've defined what a task is, we need to organize them into some sort of task management system. Remember how we said our brain is not for storing, it's just for processing. So task management is going to be the process of capturing, organizing, and prioritizing your tasks so you always know what to do first and what to do next. Thankfully, there are so many different options for you to choose between traditional data planners to more robust management apps like Todoist and Trello and Google Calendar and Notion that sync all between different devices. If I showed you how to create a task management system in each of these apps, we would be here for hours. So instead, I'm going to focus on teaching you the larger principles that you can apply to any system. And then if you're interested in learning more about a specific app, YouTube is going to be the best place to find people who plan their entire lives using these apps. However, I also know that we retain information a lot better if we can see real life examples. So in addition to each principle that I share, I'm going to show you examples of how these principles can be applied. It's important to remember, though, that these are just examples and they're just going to help you cement this principle in your mind. You don't necessarily have to do it this way. Your success is going to come today from learning these principles and then applying them to the system that works for you, whether that's a paper and pen planner, a digital tool, or some combination of the two. So moving on to the actual tasks and how they all fit within your task management system, we're going to start with the task funnel. So when you think of where all these tasks come from, we can easily distill them down into 5 different buckets. So it's upcoming events, super easy to remember, goals, recurring tasks, which happen on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, random to-dos that pop into your head at the weirdest moments, your master task list, which if you don't have one, you will by the end of this class. It's one of my favorite tools. Each bucket filters down to what you need to do this week and then what you need to do today. This is what I call the task funnel. So this visual shows you that tasks don't just float around with this method. They have a direction and they also have a flow. It's also an excellent physical representation of the amount of time you have in a day. The tasks from each bucket get funneled down into what you can realistically complete today. So now we're going to go explore each of these buckets in greater detail and explain how you might use them and how they relate to your task management tool. The first one is pretty self-explanatory. So this is upcoming events, any task that you need to do related to a future event. You're going to need some sort of tool to keep track of these upcoming events and appointments so you don't forget about them. Google Calendar makes this really easy because you can view your calendar on your phone when you're out and about, as well as sync this calendar with other members in your household. But you can obviously use a paper calendar too, whether it's hanging on your wall or hanging out in your paper planner. And then when you plan out your week, I personally like to do this every Sunday evening. You're going to look at all the events that are happening over the next 2 weeks. Maybe your sister's birthday is coming up, so you need to buy a gift or send a card. In this screenshot, you could see I had a wedding anniversary coming up. So I needed to add tasks to my weekly task list, like making a dinner reservation or checking movie times. Whatever the events are, make sure that you add tasks related to those events to your week far enough ahead of time so you're not scrambling to accomplish them at the last minute. So that's the first bucket. The second are your current goals or projects. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the 6-week sprint method. This is the goal setting framework that I use and promote. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that here because you can learn more about it at practicaldreamerbook.com. But in general, if you're working towards a goal or any goal, you are going to have a list of tasks related to that goal. So, for instance, earlier this year, I was working on rebranding and redesigning the KaylinBrook.com website. So on my list, I had a lot of tasks related to the actual design. I needed to add new graphics to the homepage, decide on categories, write different copy. In the 6-week sprint specifically, you would assign each of these tasks to week 1 through 6 in your goal planner so that you can know what you need to do each week to stay on track. And I find it's really helpful to do this so that you understand how many tasks related to your project you can realistically add to each week. And then when you go to plan your actual week, you're going to transfer the tasks from that goal planner over to your current weekly task list, wherever you have that located. And this is how you accomplish those big goals and bigger projects that take a lot of little action steps to complete, not by plotting them out in a different notebook and then forgetting about them. You have to integrate those tasks alongside your normal everyday tasks, so you're constantly reminded about what you're working towards. This third bucket is recurring tasks, tasks that occur on a regular basis. It could include bills that come due every month or doing laundry on the same day every week. This is where paper planning only can get a little bit tricky, because you could write and rewrite all of these tasks every week or month whenever they occur. But if you wanted something a little bit more automated, you could take advantage of the Google Calendar reminder and task feature. So you just type in your task and then you set the date and time that you want it to recur, and it will automatically show up on that date for whatever time frame you set it. For example, I have a task titled Design New Printables that pops up every 3 weeks. So if that task shows up when I'm planning out my next week, I know I need to carve out time for that task and perhaps drop a different task that I was planning to add. But suppose you really want that more tactile system using a paper planner without writing down these tasks repeatedly. Here's a little hack for you. Grab a label maker and print out all the recurring tasks you can think of: the laundry, finances, organizing your paperwork, etc. Then you're going to add those labels to sticky Post-it flags. Each week, you can peel and stick those flags to a specific day. And then when you complete that task, just move the flag to the following week or back to the dashboard like I show here. Our fourth bucket, this next one, holds all those random to-dos, things you think of in the shower or while you're falling asleep at night, or maybe you're talking with a friend and suddenly your conversation spurs an action item that you totally forgot about and need to complete ASAP. So if the task can be completed in 2 minutes or less, just do it. No need to write it down and waste time organizing it somewhere. But if they take longer than 2 minutes, I would do one of two things. The first one is to add that task straight to your weekly or daily task list. Or if you don't need to complete that task this week, let's say it's a task you want to do someday, then you can move that task over to your master task list. And this is the final task bucket that we're going to talk about. But a quick note before we move on to that. If you are out and about and you don't have your planner with you, you can always jot down these to-dos as you think of them in a note on your phone. I just keep a running list going. And then when you plan out your week, you can move and organize these tasks into their proper place. So that leads us to our last final task bucket, the master task list. This is where all those tasks go that do not have a specific date assigned to them yet. So they're house projects you hope to get to someday, ideas you have for a side hustle, a creative project you want to pursue, something like that. Just because you're not planning on tackling these tasks right away doesn't mean you should forget about them. I have included 2 master tasks printable planning pages in the packet you downloaded earlier today. One design is a little bit more customizable because you can add your own headers to the page. So you could use different life area categories such as work, home, or personal tasks. And then the other design is labeled for you with some columns to mark what's low priority, medium priority, high priority, and then also which tasks you could possibly delegate to someone else. If you'd rather keep your master task list digitally, which this is actually what I do, you could again keep a running list on your phone, or you could do what I prefer, and that is keep a database of tasks in Notion. So Notion is a tool where you can easily add comments or upload images and other files to each task to give it a specific context. And most importantly, you can go through and easily delete things that you don't want to do anymore or just don't make sense for your life right now. So I know that was a lot of info to digest. So I want to quickly recap this task funnel before we move on. All of the task buckets we just discussed are where your task could potentially come from. So those upcoming events, projects and goals, recurring tasks, random to-dos, and lastly, the master task list. Now we just need to funnel those tasks into what we need to focus on for this week. So not next week, not a month from now, we're just looking at this week. And weekly task planning is really quite essential. If you go into a week without planning for it, you end up playing defense all week and trying to tackle everything headed your way. And this only adds undue stress and anxiety to your life, and you'll end the week probably feeling really frustrated and flustered. But when you plan your week in advance, you become proactive. You can assess what needs to be done without worrying about how it's all going to fit. So, like Michael Hyatt says, and I love how he says this, you have a choice in life. You can either live on purpose according to the plan you've set, or you can live by accident, reacting to the demands of others. A weekly planning routine is going to help you approach each week with purpose. But you first have to decide, when are you going to do this? Some people like to plan their week on Friday as a way to close out the previous week and enjoy the weekend. Others, like myself, prefer Sunday evening as a way to prepare for the week. And some enjoy doing it first thing Monday morning. Choose any time that works with your schedule, because the when does not matter as much as the consistency of the routine does. You want to be prepared for the week ahead of time so you can use that time most productively. And then once you know when you're going to plan, you want to create your own weekly planning routine. So these are the same series of steps that you will complete in order every time you sit down to plan the next 7 days. I'm going to share a sample routine that is based on what I do when I sit down at my desk every Sunday. You can use this routine as is, or you can tweak it to fit your schedule, whatever you decide. But it is a good idea to write down the order of your routine, just so you can refer back to it weekly. Again, I use Notion to keep this as a running list that I can refer back to, but you could also write it down on a page in your paper planner or in a separate notebook too. As we go through this planning routine, I'm going to show you all of this routine with a 2-page weekly planning page as an example. And the reason why I'm using this is because I really want us to see our entire week at a glance. So first off, grab whatever planning tool you want to use, and you're going to mark down any fixed events and appointments. This is the first thing that we need to add because they are permanent and immovable. So let's add a doctor's appointment to Monday, and then let's say our mom's birthday is on Tuesday. So we've got those down. The next step is going to go back to our first task bucket that we talked about, and that's writing down any tasks related to those events that we just wrote down. So here I wrote down, we need to call mom and wish her a happy birthday on Tuesday because her birthday's on Tuesday. Remember, you're going to look at events in 1 to 2 weeks from now and write down any tasks from those. So on Saturday here, you can see there's also a community garage sale. So I probably want to spend this Saturday sorting through my closet for next Saturday's garage sale. Before moving on to the other buckets, now is a really good time to migrate any tasks from last week over to this one. So let's say we meant to drop off a bag of donations to the thrift store and we completely forgot, because how often does that usually happen? Now we'll add that task to this week on Monday, because when we're already out and about for a doctor's appointment, that would just make sense to go by the thrift store. The next bucket that we're going to tackle is bucket number 2, which are any tasks related to current goals or projects that are on your list. So going back to where we discussed a task versus a project, let's use that example of planning a summer vacation. So this week we'll add one task from that project, and that's to research lodging, and we'll add it on Tuesday. The next bucket after that is those recurring tasks. So these are the tasks you typically do every week. I added grocery shopping on Monday, laundry on Tuesday and Thursday. And then on Friday, I put down, let's clean the house and let's check in on our finances. Moving on to bucket number 4, those are jotting down any of those random to-dos. It's time to brain dump anything that you can think of that you have to get done this week. And this bucket is going to probably take up the majority of your week, depending on how much stuff is pressing and has to get done. You're going to see your days fill out a little bit more, and you could completely stop right here if you wanted and say, all right, here's my week, we're done. Let's go into this week with these tasks only. If there is room to add more, and this is a big if, you could see what you could pull from your master task list over to this week. So that's our final task funnel bucket, number 5. Since this Wednesday is looking a little light, we'll write down that we want to start that travel photography course that we signed up for a few months ago and kind of forgot about until we referenced our master task list. But in your own weekly planning, you have to be really realistic with this. There are many weeks where I don't pull anything over from my master task list. And other times I have room to pull 2 or 3 tasks. So you want to know your limits and your own capacity so you don't overwhelm yourself. You're allowed to take it easy if you have a lighter day and you want to keep it that way. As you work your way through this weekly planning routine, something I suggest is to front load your tasks on Monday and Tuesday, and then leave a lighter load on Wednesday through Friday. I've learned this the hard way. I spent years packing my weeks full, and then I was really frustrated at all the unexpected things that happened during the week. And that made me push more and more tasks over to the next day. Eventually, they all piled up on Friday when I had the least amount of energy to work on them for the week. So instead, give yourself room to migrate the tasks that you don't finish. This is going to keep your entire week much more manageable. All right, so the final part of the task funnel is daily task planning. You could plan the most productive week possible, plotting out all the tasks you want to complete in the next 7 days. But solely working from a weekly list could also result in massive task procrastination. And here's why. When you see that you have 7 full days to complete your to-do list, you feel like you have all the time in the world. And then suddenly it's Thursday, and all that time you had in the past few days disappears, and you're stuck scrambling to finish off that list. But when you break off a few of those tasks each day, sometimes it often seems a lot more doable, and you make steady, consistent progress throughout the week. But just like everyone prefers to complete their weekly planning routine on a different day, people like to create their daily to-do lists at different times too. Some prefer making their list the day of, others swear by the night before. So when should you do it? I tend to lean towards the night before, and I'm going to give you 3 of my best arguments for why. The first one is you're going to give yourself the gift of closure. At the end of the day, when you write tomorrow's list and migrate your unchecked tasks from today to tomorrow, you're telling yourself that you're done working and you don't need to think about anything else. Then you can actually relax. In the same vein, you'll fall asleep easier. So no more tossing and turning because you've already written down your plan for tomorrow. You don't need to stress about forgetting something when you've already dumped all those lingering tasks on paper. And then the third reason is you're not going to waste time wondering what you should be doing. With your game plan already in place, you're going to hit the ground running as soon as you complete your morning routine. Now, whether you use a paper planner or an app, you're going to open up that tool the night before and follow a 2-step process to plan your day. First, you're going to write down any events and appointments for that day. And then you're going to add all the tasks that you want to accomplish for the day, including any tasks from the previous day that you didn't finish. As you're doing this, you want to be really mindful of how long each task is going to take so you don't overload your list. I mentally add about 30 minutes extra just in case. Remember, it's a lot better to have a shorter to-do list that you can add more to later than reach the end of the day feeling like you accomplished nothing. So once you've created your task list for the week and day, it's probably going to feel like everything you wrote down is essential. But remember, this class is called Priority Task Management. So right now, we're going to get into how to prioritize exactly what tasks need to get done. Because if you study each task on your list, you'll see some things don't actually have to get done this week or at all. We just think they do. So your next step is to look over your weekly and daily tasks and distill them down to your absolute must-dos. And you don't have to use whiteout or cross things out and make it messy. Instead, just grab a highlighter or a different colored pen and mark your top must-do items for the week and then for the day. On to-do list apps, you can do a similar thing by adding priority flags, tags, or different colors to digitally highlight those important tasks. And the number of items you highlight is really going to depend on how involved each task is. Some are more time consuming than others, and not everyone has the same availability or energy to complete those tasks. But in general, I would shoot for your top 5 must-do tasks for your week, and then your top 3 for each day. And as you're considering which tasks to highlight, here are 2 questions that can help you decide what is actually a priority. The first one is, what items feel really important and really urgent? These are going to make a significant impact and are things you need to do right away. Sometimes a visual can be really helpful to understand how this works and how to prioritize your tasks. The method that I have shown here in this printable page is called the Eisenhower matrix. So if you wanted to, you could plot all your tasks for the week into one of these 4 boxes. So you've got urgent and important not important, important but not urgent, and then not urgent or important. The top left box is the stuff that you want to complete first. Like, let's say your toilet is currently backed up and you need to call a plumber. That's pretty important and pretty urgent. Sometimes I use this method if I'm really stressed out about the coming week and I'm not sure what order I should tackle my tasks. But eventually, this is going to become second nature to know what tasks are going to land in that important and urgent quadrant. The second question is, what tasks would make your life easier and less hectic for this week and then going on into the future? So I immediately think of things like meal planning or organizing an entryway closet. These tasks take time, but have a ripple effect on the rest of your to-do list. They lead to a more organized and peace-filled life that will ultimately help you feel more in control and more on top of everything. And then once you're finished highlighting those must-do tasks, once you've decided, okay, these are the things that I absolutely have to focus on, I like to look at the rest of my list as a bonus. The truth is, most people overestimate the number of tasks that they can complete in a week. So I highly encourage you to shoot for a lower number than you feel comfortable with, because you can always add in other tasks later on. This is going to really focus your efforts so you don't feel stretched too thin among all those tasks. You'll also surprise yourself with how much more energy you have when you can visibly see a completed to-do list rather than one that's left undone. If you want to go one step further and really see how much or how little you can fit into your schedule, I highly suggest you try time blocking. When you insert your must-do tasks among immovable events and your typical daily tasks, you might find there's not a lot of extra margin left. And this knowledge is not only going to help you put less on your calendar, you'll also be less tempted to squeeze more tasks into your day than physically possible. I like to time block my tasks using a digital tool like Google Calendar because it's so easy to move blocks around if a task takes longer than I expect it to. But if you prefer using paper, there's a lot of paper time blocking printables and planners you can use, and I included a couple of those in your download packet. So far, we have discussed all of our task buckets. Then we went over a task management system with weekly and daily planning, and then how to prioritize those tasks. But there's one more essential step that we need to do at the end of each day and each week. And this is a short review about what you accomplished, what you didn't, and why. So a task audit, if you will. This exercise, it doesn't need to be super formal, but it's healthy to dedicate a few minutes at the end of your week and day to reassess your to-do list and objectively view how it went. So maybe you were interrupted a lot and you felt like you couldn't give a lot of undivided attention to some tasks. Perhaps other things came up that took precedence over your to-do list. These could be one-time events, or maybe you're starting to see a pattern emerge, and that's a telltale sign that you need to switch things up. So just a couple examples of this. Let's say you really want to create a meal plan for the week every Sunday night because you know that's going to make more sense for you in the kitchen and you're going to be able to use up your food and not waste it. But it seldom happens because Sunday evenings are hectic with other things. So switching that task to Monday morning might actually produce better results. Or maybe you find it really hard to concentrate on certain tasks while your kids are awake. You could rearrange your day so you're doing simpler tasks like folding laundry when they're most awake. The potential for interruption does not derail these kinds of tasks. So then you would be able to save more focused tasks like writing or reading for when they're taking a nap or having their quiet time. And while it's not lovely to experience, interruptions and frustrations can actually work in your favor. They can highlight some problem areas and force you to come up with a creative solution. And that solution can streamline your work instead of making you feel like you have to constantly fight against it, resulting in a better workflow than before. And also, when your time is limited, you're actually more likely to prioritize what needs to get done. Remember when I showed you earlier how time blocking can shed light on how little time you really have? When you accept this limitation for yourself, you focus only on those essential must-do tasks, and you're more likely to notice how few tasks on your list are that important and can be shifted to later in the week or next week or not at all. Here is where I would start paying attention though. If you migrate a task for more than 3 days, and by migrating, I mean rewriting an uncompleted task from one day to the next, there's a reason why you're not accomplishing this task. Maybe it's because that task is not that important. Perhaps you're procrastinating and simply don't want to do it. Ask yourself why. Look at that task objectively to see if it even belongs on your list at all, or if you should move it to your master task list to tackle at a later date. In paper planning especially, it can feel really annoying to keep writing down that task day after day, but this is actually a great perk of the analog system. So with a digital task management app, you can easily move that task to the next day and the next day and the next until one day, everything you've pushed aside comes due on the same day and you're looking at one massive list. But when you write down that task for the third or fourth time physically, you start to wonder, does this task actually deserve a spot on my daily task list? You want to make sure that everything you've assigned to a specific day is current and worthy of your attention. So the last thing I want to talk about are 3 potential temptations that you might face as you tackle your task list. These temptations are not impossible to overcome. They're just things you want to think about as you plan your weeks and days. So the first temptation is the temptation to multitask, which we all struggle with. And deep down, we know multitasking is a myth. But in today's fast-paced world, no one wants to really believe this is true. However, if you've ever listened to a podcast while cooking dinner and knocked out a few things on your to-do list while chatting on the phone, you might think you're multitasking and you're successful at it, but you're really not. Your brain just flits back and forth between the tasks so quickly without giving full attention to either one. Your cooking goes on autopilot as you tune into an interesting phrase from your podcast. And while you're focused on measuring ingredients, the podcast slowly fades into the background. But your brain switches so quickly that you might not even notice the back and forth. In the book, The One Thing, which I highly recommend, the authors compare multitasking to juggling. They say juggling is just an illusion. To a casual observer, the juggler is juggling 3 balls at once, but they're actually being independently caught and thrown in rapid succession, 1 ball at a time. And it's what researchers refer to as task switching. So while you may think that you can concentrate on 2 things at once, your brain can only focus on 1 thing at a time. And every time you switch activities, you're sending your already exhausted brain through a series of mental gymnastics as it adjusts to its new role. So here's the solution. When it comes to your to-do list, you first want to remove as many distractions as you can. When I need to focus, I turn my phone on Do Not Disturb or go so far as to put it away in a box so it's not tempting me to pick it up. And secondly, you're going to have to remind yourself of this one over and over because I certainly do. Remember to focus on 1 task at a time, just 1. You already know that your brain can't concentrate on 2 things at once. So let's try not to be smarter than our brains. This methodical way of moving through our to-do list will result in more progress and faster progress than multitasking ever will. The second temptation is to create unrealistic timeframes. For some reason, we think we can accomplish things quicker than humanly possible. We don't expect interruptions or setbacks, and so we plan our days on how we think they'll go idealistically rather than realistically. And this goes badly every single time. In fact, I cringe when I see people schedule their day down to the very last minute, kind of like when we were back in high school and we had these types of schedules where the buzzer would ring at 9:55 a.m. and we had 5 minutes to rush to the next class. Most of us don't live in such a controlled environment like that anymore, and we can plan as much as we want. But between phone calls and child meltdowns and insane traffic, we can't always predict how that plan is going to go, even if we tried to do it that way. So, what should we do instead? The first thing is you could track your time for various tasks so you know how long they actually take. Maybe you assume that your morning routine is just going to take an hour and a half if it includes a workout, reading time, breakfast, and getting ready for the day. But after tracking your time, you realize, it takes actually 2 hours to do all that without me feeling rushed. The other thing I want you to try is to build in time for delays. Earlier, I suggested adding 30 minutes to most tasks to give yourself that extra margin. You might not always need it, but at least you won't overschedule yourself if every task on your list has 30 minutes built into it. And when you do need it, you'll be happy you planned in that buffer zone. Eventually, you're going to get better at knowing how much you can reasonably add to your list. Remember, less is better. Everything above and beyond your highlighted to-dos is just a bonus. The third temptation is to wait for motivation. I wish that we could rely on motivation to cruise through our to-do list. That would be pretty amazing. We could accomplish so much if we felt like working. But unfortunately, motivation isn't like that. You've all experienced this. That magical can't wait to do the work feeling doesn't usually appear when we need it most. Instead, motivation most resembles a wave. Waves don't stay the same. They rise, they fall. Some hold a lot of power, others don't. We can't wait for the high point of a motivational wave to make forward progress on our goals and tasks. If we do, we might be waiting for a very long time. So rather than wish for motivation, we need to focus instead on consistency. With consistency, you do the work regardless of how you feel, which I know does not sound fun or sexy at all, but that's how we develop discipline. You don't wait for the right mood or time or supplies to start. You just take the right next step forward. And more often than not, motivation is going to soon follow once you take that first step. You just need that initial momentum. Secondly, ask yourself how doing this task, whatever it is going to benefit your future self. Envision yourself at the end goal, whether it's a fitness goal or a clutter-free home or side hustle you hope will become your full-time income one day. It's so easy to push things off, but when you keep your future self in mind, you're more likely to do the thing that's going to help you reach that ideal version of yourself. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this quote from that amazing book I already mentioned, The One Thing. Live with purpose and you know where you want to go. Live by priority, and you'll know what to do to get there. When we tackle a to-do list, we're doing something. But the real question is, are we doing what moves us in the direction we want to go? Are we spending our days fighting fires, or are we doing what really matters to improve our homes, our families, our work, and ourselves? You all know this. We have just 24 hours in a day to accomplish everything we need and want to do. And that's going to force us to be really strategic about the time we have left. Our priorities are going to help us define what's essential and what's not. So, for example, if you value a clean and clutter-free home, you're more likely to wash the dishes before watching a TV show. If you value travel and adventure, you're more likely to spend time building a business that can sustain that kind of lifestyle. If you value your family time, you probably won't say yes to social activities that take you away from your family. And if you're not sure of your priorities, you can take these questions to your journal and give yourself some time to explore these answers. So first is, what do you want your life to look like? What do you envision it looking like? The second one is, what fills you up on the inside? And then the third one, and probably the most important one, is, what legacy do you want to leave? The answers to these questions are going to be different for everyone. But once you establish clearly defined priorities, you can check in with yourself in those priorities when other things threaten to take your attention away from what is truly important. Because when you look at your to-do list with your priorities in mind, you won't just know exactly what to focus on and why. You'll also be moving towards the places you want to go, the goals you want to achieve, and the people you want beside you along the way. So that's all I have to share for this specific class. I'm going to open it up to questions. I can clarify anything that we talked about here, or we can discuss different productivity hacks or anything to do to make your to-do list more manageable, or we could talk about something completely unrelated. So whatever would be most helpful for you, we can take a lot of different directions with this. So let me stop sharing my screen and we'll get back in to the chat. Okay, and I see we've got 4 questions. Take a sip there. Okay, so there's one that I always feel like I'm behind all week if a scheduling conflict keeps me from planning at my typical time. So how do you get back on track if you miss your Sunday night planning session? So I'm always looking for different blocks to like move things. So let's say I missed my typical workout time. I'm like, okay, what's the next best block to do this? So I would say if you usually do it on Sunday and you didn't, then find out, okay, where can I wake up a little bit earlier on Monday morning and do that block then? Is it maybe something that would be better to plan around lunchtime? So it's just kind of checking your schedule and seeing where can you shift that next block to see what is the next best time. Another one is, how many times do you push a task to the next day, week before you decide whether or not to remove it all together? And that's a really good one. So I usually, if I'm pushing a task, I would say 4 to 5 times. Then I have to really reassess whether that task is worth doing or not. Like, why am I procrastinating on that? And just kind of dig in to see, is it really necessary or do I just think it's necessary? So I would say probably if I'm migrating it about 4 or 5 different times. Sometimes if I see that I'm moving it from week to week to week and I'm not getting it done, and it is something I need to get done, then I need to look at the other tasks on the list and just say, okay, what can I push down to make sure that this actually happens? Because according to the questions that I've asked myself and what I've reassessed, that is what I need to prioritize instead of keep putting it off. And then I'll answer this last question here. What part of prioritizing is the hardest for you? I would say, because I experience a lot of FOMO, so that's fear of missing out. And I think all this stuff has to get done absolutely right now. So that's probably the hardest part. And then I have to go back and think, okay, what is actually going to bring, and I like to use this business term because I did go to school for business. So what is going to bring the biggest ROI, the biggest return on investment for my time? Is it going to be something that's going to matter in the next week, month, or 5 years? Or is it really not going to matter at all? And that kind of can help you prioritize different things and understand what you can do first. So awesome. Thanks, Krista, for coming, Shannon for coming, Jonathan. I really appreciate you coming to this session. And if you have any other questions that you can think of that I wasn't able to answer today, please email me. Joseph, you can put my email in the chat. It's kaylinbrook@gmail.com or kaylin@kaylinbrook.com. Thank you. And you can send a question to either one of those emails. They go to the same place, and I'd be happy to talk about this further with you. So thank you so much for attending. And I really hope that you learned something here that you can take away and apply to your weekly and daily task planning and to-do lists. And that's all for me tonight. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will catch you later.